Hey everybody, it's Benjamin Bok Choy here again with another video. So I've been learning how to drive without the racing line on, and this is just kind of me going through the process of practicing without the racing line, how I do it personally anyway. So we're just gonna start off with Australia, first track on the schedule, and what I usually do is just run a couple laps with the racing line on, just to kind of get used to where my braking points and turning in points should be. And then I'll turn it off and do it without the racing line for a little while. And then, I'll turn it back on just to kind of get my bearings again and just repeat the process. So as you can see, I'm ranked 1873 um, on time trial in Australia with the racing line on. I'm just using a Simon Weigang setup here. He's one of the top drivers that can verify that actually set a legitimate time. So you can see the setup is just 3.9 wings. It's a very oversteery setup, but it's pretty good for time trials, just because you can pretty much just reset and start over again whenever you want to. So this is the first couple laps with the racing line on. Just using it as a baseline, getting used to where the braking spots should be, and kind of getting used to the gears through the turns and how the car feels overall on the track. So you can see that it is. I mean, I'm not going to match my personal best here or anything like that, but on a good day, I could match it if I put in enough time. And of course, right away we invalidate our lap. But there's a couple corners here that I have some problems with that you'll probably see during the race. This one especially right here, I end up usually going deep. You kind of want to kiss this curb on the right hand side there, and then just go flat out. Short shift to fourth gear and then go flat out. But I have a lot of trouble with that one. I go in deep a lot of the times. This one, if I can set it up correctly, this left-right, I can usually take that turn pretty well. But as you can see from there, sometimes I don't get it right, and I'll just crash out of that corner combination there. Setting on the DRS assist just so it's one less thing that I have to worry about when I'm trying to learn this track. Australia is not a super strong track for me. Not one of my favorite tracks either. It's very hard to pass on this track, and I'm not a big fan of tracks that's difficult to overtake on. You'll notice that I do have a lot of trouble through many corners in this track right here. That little lift off onto the left-hand turn there gives me problems from time to time. But if I can nail every corner nice and tidily, I can usually set a pretty good lap here. And whenever I'm on racing online in online ranked matches, I do pretty well at Australia. So we'll just kind of sit through this lap right here to see how it should be run. So coming up to this corner right here, there's a little blotch on the ground, a little dark blotch on the ground. You'll notice it if you race without the racing line on. I like to hit the brakes a meter or so before that little dark spot on the ground. Coming up to this corner here, the braking line says you should brake a little bit after the 50-meter board, but I usually brake right at the 50-meter board and carry a little bit more speed into the corner. And then that last corner right there at the 75-meter mark, there's no board up there, but it's between the 100 and the 50 board. And then that last corner right there, hitting the brakes right before the 50-meter board. And just praying to God that you hit those last couple of corners well enough. So turn one, there's another little dark spot on the ground there that I like to hit the brakes about a meter before you get to that little dark spot. And then this turn right here, right at that black square on the on the wall on your left, and then for that left-hand turn, right at the black square on the wall on your right. And then coming up to this corner right here, right where the wall breaks, there's a little white sign on the left-hand side. That's where I hit the brakes and turn in. And again, I don't know if you can see, yeah, there's a dark spot in the ground right there for that right-hand turn. And that's the braking markers that I like to use for this track. Probably not the most efficient spots to brake, but I'm not really amazing at this game or anything like that. So I can get some solid performances using those braking markers without the racing line on. But a couple decent laps. These are the first laps of the morning for me. It's about 5 in the morning right now. I kind of woke up at 10 o'clock last night after a really long nap and just kind of got up and decided to get on the computer and do some laps. So those are the kind of warm-up laps without the racing line. So I usually do 2 or 3 full laps, and then I'll turn the racing line off. So here we go, no racing line. Hopefully you'll see this dark spot in the ground a little bit clearer. You see that right there. It's not super noticeable, but I mean, once you see it, it's really hard to not see it. And then again right here, just as you hit the black square on the left, and then just as you hit that black square on the right, flat out through this corner here. You can take a curb. You can take the curb on that right-hand corner, but it unsettles the car a little bit. And hopefully you'll see the black spot on the ground coming up here. Little splotch. But you can also go just about halfway between the last 2 red markers on the left side wall there. And we did not take that particularly well. So this is generally what I do to kind of learn a track without the racing line on. Sometimes I can hook up the lap pretty well right off the bat, but it takes me a couple laps to kind of get used to not having the racing line on. You get so used to seeing the green, yellow, and red squares in the road that once you take that away, even if you know where you're supposed to hit the brakes or where you're supposed to turn in, there's just some sort of a mental block there. And even if you're thinking about hitting the brakes where you're supposed to, at least for me anyway, I still miss it sometimes and I'll go in too deep. But with enough time and practice, you can kind of get over those barriers, those mental blocks. Obviously didn't work there, but we'll skip ahead to a lap where I get a pretty decent time, even though I do invalidate the lap halfway through. But this one was okay. You get enough of these laps and you'll gain enough confidence to where you're not going to give up. Because I've tried learning how to drive without the racing line previously in the F1 2019 game, but I don't think I was doing it properly. I kind of just dove in and just turned off all the assists and didn't really prepare or set a goal or anything like that. So I got frustrated and just kind of stopped after a couple days. But this year I decided to really plan it out and really take it seriously, try and learn these tracks. And as you can see, we actually set a green sector 1 there. So it was pretty good up until the beginning of sector 2. And so far we're only a tenth and a half down. It's not a bad lap. This is a pretty solid lap without the racing line, but you'll see we cut that corner right there and invalidate our lap. But overall, I was pretty happy with this lap. It was a pretty decent time. So usually once I get enough of these laps where I finish within or around a half a second of my personal best, then I'll go into a race and kind of just test to see where I am against the AI. Usually I'll just pick out the Mercedes car, pick out Valtteri Bottas, and race against the Lewis Hamilton AI. Compare myself against the Lewis Hamilton AI. So here we go. 25% race, soft to medium pit strategy. And Hamilton's in front of us, so that's good. I like to be behind him to kind of see if I can catch up to him during the race. Pretty decent start there. Avoid the collision between Leclerc and Albon there. Hopefully try and get out in front of him and keep up with Lewis Hamilton. But just avoiding any collisions at turn one is usually enough of a victory for me to keep my confidence up here. And the Ferraris are usually slow enough to where I can kind of pass them without any issue. So at 110 AI with the driving line on, I can follow Hamilton, but it's really hard for me to pass. At 105, I can pass Hamilton. I can overtake Hamilton on track without too many issues. But sometimes Verstappen's a wild card. Verstappen is really hard. It depends on what track and where he starts on the grid. Sometimes it's easy for me to overtake him. Sometimes it's really difficult for me to even keep up with Verstappen. So he's kind of a wild card during these races. Whereas Hamilton, I know unless the AI difficulty is at 105, I usually won't be able to overtake Hamilton on certain laps. Certain tracks, I should say. But so far, keeping up with Verstappen on this first lap here, looking to pass. The AI likes to use up all their ERS on lap 1. As you can see, his light was flashing. But we make the overtake without too much of a hassle there. So I have been practicing for a little while, so it's not like I just decided today to try and learn this track. But even just a month ago, 100 AI driver level was kind of really hard for me without, even with the racing line on. But I just got a new Fanatec setup, and with the load cell kit on the brake pedals, it's improved my times by quite a lot here. So I recommend if you're looking to make up any lap time, I would invest more in a brake, in a pedal set than a steering wheel set or a wheelbase. I feel like the brake pedal has done a lot more for me than the actual wheelbase. Although the wheelbase does feel nice. The CSL Elite is a really nice wheelbase. Much better than the G29 that I was using. But anyway, coming to the start of lap 3 here, DRS is enabled. We are within the DRS window of the two cars in front of us. But it's really hard to be the third vehicle in a DRS train here. As a third car, you're kind of too far back to overtake P1, and P2 obviously has DRS as well, so unless they make a mistake, it'll be really hard to overtake P2. But it is a Ferrari in first place right now, so hopefully we can do something to get by. Or if Hamilton gets by, then hopefully we can get by without too much of a problem. Having a slam on the brakes there because Hamilton locked up. That's a corner that I have a lot of problems with. Usually end up going too deep or missing the inside curb on the right and losing some time. It's only a couple tenths, but you do that enough laps in a row and you'll be down a second or two before you even know it. But this is pretty good. Keeping within about a half a second of Lewis Hamilton's AI here is quite well. Doing quite well. Even though Vettel is kind of bottlenecking him. Having Verstappen give a look up on the inside there. Surprised I wasn't pulling away as fast as I thought I would be, even with overtake on and DRS.
Safety car, safety car. No overtaking.
This kind of threw a wrench into the race, because I'm assuming that the team's going to pit me now to throw me on the mediums, so that we don't lose too much time. But of course, I'm the second Mercedes on the track, so Hamilton will get in there first, and I'll be held up. And then there is as you can see on the minimap, there is a bunch of traffic behind us. So we will probably get pinned into our pit area while the other cars pass. So now I'm trying to hold the rest of the grid back as much as possible so that Lewis can get in there and get out without holding me up too much. I don't want to fall too far back because, again, like I said earlier, we're using Lewis Hamilton here as a measuring stick. So I don't want to get lost in traffic behind a bunch of cars and then not really be able to see how I'm comparing to his AI driving. So I'm backing up the pack here and hoping that I don't lose too much time in the pit lane. But I also know that if you slow down too much, the cars behind can just pass you. And now I don't have to worry about speeding in the pit lane because nobody's really in a rush to get to the pit lane right now because under a safety car. But I try to slow down anyway, and then Verstappen ends up just ghosting through me. But Hamilton gets in and gets out. I hate that little pause before they start working on the car. But 4 seconds isn't too bad, and then we don't get held up either. Looks like there was enough of a... Oh no, it just looks like every car had already passed. But anyway, coming out of the pit stop here, you can see we're right behind Hamilton, so I'm happy about that. We can still use him as a measuring stick for our racing ability without the racing line assist. I'm just going to fast forward through the safety car because it takes up another lap and a half or so. So now coming to the end of the safety car here, I'm kind of worried about my tires because they've cooled down a lot. The AI doesn't really like to slow down and warm up tires, but I'm not really paying attention too much, and the field starts going and I'm kind of caught out and I lose a little bit of time here. But we're in P11, so there's a whole bunch of cars in front of Hamilton and Vettel, so I'm not super worried about them pulling away by too much. And the cars ahead are obviously, Vettel was the first to pit under safety cars, so the cars ahead are on really slow, old tires. So hopefully I can catch up with these guys. But Ocon looks really racy behind me. I'm trying not to waste too much ERS, and we have plenty of fuel here, but I don't want to waste too much ERS trying to catch up to Vettel and Hamilton when I know that I can catch up to them eventually, and we do here at the end of Sector 1. We're right up behind them again. So this is good. We're still behind Hamilton. I can still use them to compare our driving skill. And now we're on the medium tires, so the braking points have to be a little bit further back. And the turn-in points are a little bit different now. And as you can see, they're Ocon trying to pass us. Having to burn a little bit of our ERS to stay in front of him. I don't want to fall behind him and then lose sight of Vettel and Hamilton. That was just a mistake. I was watching Ocon in the mirror there. I wasn't trying to pass. Although for a split second there, I did think about it. But Hamilton turned in and I would have hit him if I tried to push it any further. So I just hit the brakes and got out of that. Now you can see the guys that started on the medium tires are starting to pit. So we're moving back up positions again.
We've moved into P8. That's P8 now.
But so far this race, I haven't really gone off the track or anything like that. I've gone deep into some corners, but we haven't gone off the track. So looks like I'm starting to do rather well at 100 AI level with the driving anyway. I will have to tighten things up a little bit if I ever plan on beating AI at 110, but at level 100, I think this is okay pace. Having to run in rich mode to stay in front of Ocon there, the engine is overheating a little bit. But from what I hear, the power loss due to engine overheating isn't too debilitating on the car. It's a good thing we still have Giovinazzi out in front, keeping these two guys backed up. But now he pits. There's a couple other cars in the pit lane too. Now I think just one more car in front of us that hasn't pitted yet, and DRS is enabled again. So it looks like Hamilton will be passing Vettel in a little bit. Vettel has looked slow all race, and Hamilton's been right on his rear wing the entire time. So I'm expecting a pass sooner or later here. And I know as soon as Hamilton gets out in front of Vettel, the pace is going to quicken. And then we can really see how well we're doing without the racing line here. But this is how I've been using, this is how I've been trying to learn how to race without the racing line. Like I said earlier, start off right away with the racing line on. Just kind of get your bearings with the braking spots and when to turn in. The only thing I wish was possible would be to somehow be able to run practice sessions or even time trials with different tire compounds, because you get so used to the soft, especially if you're practicing for like an hour or so. You don't really get to choose to run on the mediums or the hards and kind of learn how to drive with the other tire compounds without other cars on the grid. So yeah, that was a bad attempt at overtaking Vettel there, but we still make it stick anyway, just because the Mercedes is so much faster than the Ferrari there. So that was the first big mistake. And overtaking without the racing line is really hard as of right now for me, just because you don't really have anything that kind of help you gauge your speed and into turns and whether or not you're gonna crash out if you brake a little bit late. But that wasn't too bad. Now we're 1.3 seconds behind Hamilton, and at the very most I'm hoping to keep up with him. As of right now, I don't think I'll be able to overtake just because I know where my driving level's at, and even though it's only a 100 difficulty right now, this is probably the highest difficulty that I can go, or highest AI level that I can go, and still be able to keep up with the Lewis Hamilton AI. Still just not really confident enough going into every corner on the track just yet. Not enough to push the car to try and overtake him, but I think just getting comfortable with the braking spots is a good first step, and when to turn in, and then just getting used to how the car feels a little bit different, when it's loaded with fuel as opposed to when it's a little bit lighter when you burn off the fuel, or on different tire compounds. So time trials is good to practice. It's a good jumping off point, but obviously you need to run actual races, just because the car and the track are in such pristine conditions in time trials. But in races, the factors are kind of changed up a little bit, so you learn how to deal with the car throughout the race in different conditions on different tires, which is good.
which I didn't do in F1 2019, and I think that's why it took me um, so long, and I still couldn't figure out how to drive without the driving line assist on. But as you can see, we're a little bit this year. I'm a little bit more confident, and I can actually keep up with Lewis Hamilton on 100 AI level. Um,
There's 5 laps of
I
fuel
wouldn't I
remaining.
wouldn't be anywhere close to this, say like a month ago. But I was doing pretty well on online races and with the racing line on, and I was looking for a different challenge, just because you kind of just run into the same people over and over again online. And I mean, I'm not saying I'm amazing or anything like that, but for my skill level, I was performing a lot better than them, but still losing out to certain guys with higher ratings than me. So I figured a good way to try and improve my lap times would be turning off the last assist that I still had on, which was the racing line, and seeing if that will help me improve a little bit. And with the new Fanatec setup and learning how to drive without the racing line, it actually has helped me out a lot. Just because you once in a while you'll make what I call a good mistake, where you run a little bit too wide at a corner that you normally don't, but then you end up actually shaving off a couple hundredths of a second, and then you realize that that line is actually quicker than the actual racing line that the game has in. So you make some good mistakes like that every once in a while, and and then you can kind of even implement that to having the racing line on, and then just for that specific corner not following the racing line, and then you improve your time overall, which has been the case in my experience. So now that I've noticed that for a couple of tracks, I figured learning how to drive without the racing line assist will probably just make me quicker if I put in enough time and
There's
learn how
4
to
laps of
drive
fuel
properly.
remaining. Some information on Vettel. It looks like the problem is terminal.
So
No
a
time
year ago when I
remaining.
started playing F1 2019, even with all the assists on the brake, the brake assists, ABS, and traction control, I was having I was having problems beating the AI at 60. That's how bad I was. But then I had been a pad player for most of my life up until last year when I bought the G29, and it's taken me a year, but I've gone from 60 AI difficulty up to 105, 110 the max. Uh, I mean, I'm not beating them in every race, but now I'm able to, at the very least, keep up with them on a lot of tracks. So for guys that are still struggling at like 70 or 75 AI difficulty, it's possible. You just have to practice the right way. Just small steps sometimes is better than diving into the deep end. And if you're using all assists right now, turning them all off and just trying to learn the track uh, cold like that probably won't help you any. You kind of have to take incremental steps um, to see any improvements. And even then, it's gonna take a while. You're not gonna cut 2 seconds off your personal best lap times in like a month. Coming towards the end of the race now, we're doing a pretty decent job. We've been staying at about 1.3 seconds for the last 4 or 5 laps. So even though we're not catching Hamilton, we're not falling back or anything like that. And our gap from Ocon is now 9 seconds, whereas what was
This
it,
is your
10 laps
final lap.
ago, 9 laps
Final lap of
ago,
the
right
race.
after whenever the safety car ended, he was right on our tail. So pulling 10 seconds, even though he is in a Renault, um, pulling a 10-second gap is pretty good for not having the racing line assist on. At least for me, anyway. I know the esports drivers can start in P20 and win a race in a 5-lap race, with the difficulty on as as high as possible, but I'm nowhere near that level. But anyway, guys, we're coming to the end of the race now. So yeah, this is just kind of my process, and I hope that this will help some of you guys. Uh, again, I mean, some people can just go from all assists on to no assists off. I mean, all assists off, and improve very quickly. But for guys like me that aren't naturally good at these racing games, this is kind of how I do it. Just little by little, upping the AI difficulty a little bit at a time, running with the racing line on for a couple laps, and then trying it without the racing line for a couple laps, and then every once in a while just throwing in a race and slowly raising that difficulty level outside your comfort zone to kind of give you a challenge. And I've seen some improvements personally. I mean, it's only been on a couple tracks. I've only just started trying to race without the racing line now for maybe a month or so. But I've seen a lot of improvement, and I feel like I'm getting better at this game. So yeah, I'll probably be putting out some more videos like this on other tracks, and kind of show you my process as I go along, and hopefully for some of you newer guys out there, hopefully it'll help you out a little bit as well, to kind of see somebody that's at your level doing what I do to try and improve my times, and I hope that you guys do enjoy these videos, and I hope that it helps you guys improve your times too. So thank you for watching this one. Remember to eat your bok choy, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Well, Ant, an end to another fantastic weekend of racing. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and we'll see you for the next one.